Hi, my name is Ann Dawson, and I like Paradox Grand Strategy games. One such grand strategy game is Crusader Kings 2, and its sequel, cleverly titled Crusader Kings 3, was just announced. If you don't know what Crusader Kings is, it's basically a strategy game. It's a medieval era historical sandbox. It's primarily concerned with modeling the relations between feudal dynasties. So, murder, torture, incest, all that fun stuff. You've probably watched Game of Thrones. It's just that. Perfectly capturing what the games are all about, Crusader Kings 3 was announced with a trailer where a hooded figure kills a baby with a snake. I fully expect the next trailer for Crusader Kings 3 to be about incest. Look for it on Pornhub. Or HBO. Video game journalism website Rock Paper Shotgun released an article entitled Crusader Kings 3: 10 Things We Know So Far. And wouldn't you know it, this humble little article would spark outrage, unparalleled since the Crusades themselves. Not really, but there was one of those internet controversies. They happen every now and again. Number 6 on that list claimed that Paradox would make no mention of the phrase Deus Vult within the game. Deus Vult, of course, is Latin for God wills it, and is associated with the Crusades. It is said that the Pope called for Christians to retake the Holy Lands of Jerusalem, and that the Crusaders he had assembled uttered the phrase Deus Vult. The phrase within Crusader Kings 2 appears in much the same way. The in-game Pope declares a crusade, and the player hits the Deus Vult button to make the pop-up go away. Unfortunately, the Crusades are a pretty rough time period to cover in a game because modern political forces wish to use those historical events to suit their own needs, namely fascists, who see the Crusades as white Europe defending itself from brown Arabs. Interest in the term spiked drastically in the lead-up and aftermath of the 2016 Trump campaign and has not returned back down to its pre-election norms since then. It, of course, has been used in countless alt-right memes. The term can even be seen used by white nationalists at the Charlottesville Unite the Right March. The term's usage by fascists has added modern baggage to a phrase that Paradox had previously been cavalier with using. They've used it as the name of one of their expansion packs, and they have used it in their marketing. After being called out for using what has become a right-wing dog whistle, they now seek to distance themselves from the scarier parts of their fanbase. That fanbase, of course, became very upset when they heard the news. I've watched a handful of videos and I've read most of the thread posted on Paradox's forums, and the discourse seems to revolve around 4 main points. Please stop me if you've heard them before. This is censorship. It's not historically accurate. They're giving the term away to hate groups. Is nothing worth fighting for? And what about the other bad stuff? Incest, baby murder? Will everything be politically correct? Why didn't you stop me? I know you heard those before. Oh, right. Parasocial relationship. You can't stop me. So, I'll respond. Obviously, it's not censorship. They were not forced to do this. It was a decision they made themselves for themselves. As for historical accuracy, the idea that Crusader Kings has ever been historically accurate is laughable. The Aztec invasion of Europe is not historically accurate. The Slavic pagan Reformation and subsequent Holy War for Germany is not historically accurate. Fighting off a great big Cthulhu monster is not historically accurate. My feminist Irish Empire is not historically accurate. Crusader Kings 2 is not historically accurate. Even if you play with those more outlandish elements turned off, the game is still not historically accurate. The second a player hits play, 1 million independent AI agents make their moves and subsequently diverge from history. The game's simulation is not built for recreating historic feats. I usually find that telling people how to play their video games is in very poor taste, but if you are going to Crusader Kings 2 for a historically accurate medieval strategy simulation, you are going to the wrong place. But furthermore, the idea that the Pope declared a crusade and the crusaders he assembled around him then yelled out, Deus Vult, is not an entirely historically accurate account either. Historians debate whether or not this actually happened. The story itself comes from a guy named Robert the Monk, who wrote about the Pope's speech many years after the fact and likely embellished his account of it. These concerns for historical accuracy will usually develop further down into fears for how the phrase's exclusion will affect the gameplay. But let me remind everyone what impact the phrase Deus Vult has currently within the game Crusader Kings 2. The in-game Pope declares a crusade, and this is represented in a big pop-up window. To make the pop-up window go away, the player hits a button that says Deus Vult. In Crusader Kings 3, if Holy Wars and Crusades work the same way, a pop-up window will likely appear, but instead of the phrase Deus Vult, Paradox will probably just translate out the Latin, so it just says God wills it instead. And you can clearly see that if you are not a fascist, the impact this has over the gameplay is non-existent. But you might also notice that if you are a fascist, this makes the game completely unplayable. Which is the hope. It's kind of the point. Moving on, does the phrase's exclusion give away meaningful symbolism and terminology to hate groups? In my video, Is the Betsy Ross Flag Racist?, I mentioned that these kind of things usually happen more so as a response to fascists who have already taken the meaningful symbolism or terminology. It's not that Paradox is giving the term to fascists, it's that the fascists had taken it, and Paradox does not want to be associated with the term or with fascism. It is not Paradox's fault that the term became associated with hate groups. It is the fault of the fascists. Paradox did not give away the term Deus Vult. The fascists already had it. To the credit of the Paradox community, this point does seem fairly realized. While many do express disappointment at the phrase's exclusion, many do express an understanding of Paradox's position. So that's something, I guess. There has been some sentiment expressed that we should fight and take back Deus Vult from the fascists. And usually I would agree with this sort of sentiment. You know, sometimes I'll say things like, we shouldn't even let the fascists have the fascies. Not that I even want it, it's just out of spite. Fuck them. But when I say things like that, it's mostly as a joke. Obviously, we should be picking our battles. I don't think Deus Vult as a phrase is particularly worth fighting for. I'm not sure it has any value outside of its time period over 900 years ago. I don't need Deus Vult. You probably don't need Deus Vult either, and Paradox certainly does not need it to make their game. What would fighting for the phrase even look like? Instead of saying, hey, have a nice day, we say, hey, Deus Vult? That's silly. No one's doing that. It's nonsense. So now we reach a destination here at the final argument, which is, what about all the other bad stuff? I mean, forced marriages, feudalism, torture, mutilations, the Crusades themselves? A trailer showing a baby being murdered is fine, but Deus Vult isn't? And to be honest, I think this would be a fair point to make if it were not being made in bad faith. The people who are upset about the exclusion of the term Deus Vult, I do not believe are sincerely concerned about those other bad things. I do, however, think there is a conversation to be had about the content within Paradox's games. Crusader Kings 2 has an expel Jewry button. Europa Universalis is literally about the colonization of the entire world by Europeans. Victoria 2 has a Trail of Tears button. Hearts of Iron 4 literally lets you play as Adolf Hitler, while Stellaris allows the player to conduct genocide on a galactic scale. No amount of abstraction or satirical text changes the nature of what is being done. Slavery is slavery and genocide is genocide, no matter how you try to obscure what it is through game mechanics. I pressed the Change Culture button. How did the culture change? How? Make no mistake, these mechanics are what draws fascists to these games. They have fantasies they want to fulfill. They can't do it in the real world, so they do it in the video game. What does it say about Paradox for wanting to make these games? And of course, what does it say about me for wanting to play these games? Untangling the morality of these games is worth a whole video, if not a whole damn book, honestly. As much as I would like to, I don't particularly feel comfortable or maybe even capable of covering that here. But I do think one of the developers made a very good point in that direction. In a Eurogamer article, content design lead Maximilian Olbers is quoted as saying this: "Grand strategy games, as a genre, are about empathy. Because not only do you play as the Crusader King, but you play as the Muslims in Mecca. It is a game about multiple perspectives. These games, according to Olbers, are about putting the player in the role of the besieged, as well as the role of the besieger." I'm not sure I 100% agree with Olbers' point, but what better example of the arbitrary and indeed evil nature of state power and state violence than a button that bluntly says, "Expel Jewry." You know, how easy it is to sign a piece of paper and how cruel the consequences are. I think there might be something to that. As for how all of this relates to Crusader Kings 3, Deus Vult, baby killing, and where one draws the line, obviously the line is drawn at where the video game intersects and impacts the real world. No one is killing babies in real life because of the Crusader Kings 3 trailer. However, real-world fascists are killing real-world people, taking up inspiration from Crusader Kings memes that normalize the language of slaughter and then conclude Deus Vult. Because of course, it's all just a joke until it isn't. Paradox is right to exclude the phrase Deus Vult from their game. Paradox is right to ban the phrase remove kebab from their forums. Paradox is right to ban mods that remove people of color from their games. Paradox is right to act against fascists. Fascists who find comfort within their games and within the communities around their games. While it is everyone's responsibility to oppose fascism, Paradox is in a unique position to directly and strongly and concretely make a bold statement against them. Of course they fucked that up though, because we all live in a capitalist hellscape of a world. The Rock Paper Shotgun article that started this whole thing was updated to include a statement from game director Henrik Farhaus, where he clarifies. "We have not specifically considered which terms are used in the game apart from making sense in the historical context. The team will decide how any text fits or does not fit into CK3 in a way that feels appropriate." What? The phrase might be in the game, or it might not. Paradox might be complacent in the rise of modern-day fascism, or, on the other hand, they might not. Who can say? You can. The comments are down there. Have at it. I know that I am incredibly disappointed with this clarification, and I know that the fascists seem to count this as a win. And I think that tells me about everything I need to know about where Paradox is at right now, which is nowhere good. I mean, honestly, why are they even making Crusader Kings 3 at all? They could be making Victoria 3. Cowards. In more ways than one. Thank you for watching. Consider liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, and clicking on the notification icon. I know that's asking for a lot, but sit back while I ask for some more. Please check out these other amazing creators who have much more interesting and profound things to say than video game company did an oopsie. For instance, children's programming did an oopsie. Ed Vadi's video, The Trains Run on Time and Topham Hatt's Sodor, an examination of fascism in Thomas the Tank Engine. Won't someone please think about the children? And while we're talking about fascist bullshit, did you know some people think anti-fascists are the real fascists? And some people think socialism is fascism. Weird, right? Labor Kyle's video, Were Hitler and the Nazis Actual Socialists? Fights against the tide of misinformation. It turns out the fascists were the real fascists the whole time. Well, the world seems to be full of bad stuff. If only there was something you could do. Oh wait, there is. Check out Silverface's video, Small Praxis. They talk about multiple ways you, yes you, can make the world a better place. So yeah, there's stuff to watch, there's stuff to do, there are actions to take, there are verbs to perform. Why not? Have a nice day.